you, Ron. Thank you so much. Thank everyone for being here. This is, it's so nice to see y'all trickling in. And you know, I kind of wanted to open up the conversation. There are quite a few people who kind of are joining us for this week, which is great. So I'm wondering if we can kind of start by opening the floor with anyone wanting to share some of their history, more specifically, if you have ever done a DNA test or any type of ancestry hunting of your own. Has anyone here had the opportunity to be able to figure out exactly where their roots start?
Do you mean like the ancestry.com type of deal, or kind of like your own research?
I mean, either one, because the ancestry.com is more for people who, I mean, it's for everybody, but a lot of people that use it don't have a lot of family to go to. Some people, their families are so close-knit that they can kind of figure out just by talking to people in their family. So either one. I'm just wondering if anyone has gone on this journey that Raquel has gone on.
Well, I'm a latecomer, and I apologize. I didn't read the book as of yet. I just
no worries at all.
Kind of am regrouping and coming back. But my journey, I did do the Ancestry 23 and or the ancestry.com. I'm not sure which one it was. I was a little taken aback by what I got. I got more South American lineage, and I mean, Puerto Ricans are mixed with a bunch of stuff, but I had a majority, probably 40% came from South America, which it blew my mind. I know that my father's side is very connected to Spain. Like, I know if I asked enough questions, I could get to the roots of the lineage in Spain. But for my mother's side, that's more, you know, trapdoor quiet. So any footwork has probably been like my own, of going to Puerto Rico, of going to these places, of kind of just finding out for myself the history.
Can I ask you, if you'd like to share, if not, no problem, but can I ask you what motivated you to even start that history hunt?
So many people have that question when they hear about me. I guess it's just a passion of wanting to know where I came from, probably was the initial reason. And then just uncovering at that time what I thought was just a lot of cool things. You know, I first started learning about our history here in New York. So I started with the Young Lords, and then it kind of rolled from there, where I actually got to meet the Young Lords. I got to befriend them. I got to, as well as the Black Panthers. So I got into those conversations. I got into those rooms. I got into those tables. And then it kind of just, I had a natural, I guess, calling to know more about my lands and more about nature and more about my history. And it kind of just rolled from there.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's kind of how it goes, right? Yeah. You know, my first research gig was on Finding Your Roots, that show with Henry Louis Gates Jr. Right. And, you know, for the white guests, we could go back, I mean, generation after generation after generation. It was documented, signed, sealed, and delivered. So easy, such an easy job. If one of the guests that I was researching, I was in the archival department, was white. But the Latina and the Latino and the Black American guests, it was like a boot camp almost, because it's so difficult, and really for a lot of people, a lot of Latino people, a lot of Black people, you can only get about 2 or 3 generations in because before you are completely, I mean, there's no way, no possible way you could find any more information on the family, on the DNA, the genetics. And, you know, I would often, you know, they have these really big, I hope no one like from that show was watching because this was illegal, but I used to like put my own name in. I used to like try to find, they have these really big databases and these really big resources that they pay a lot of money for that the public doesn't have access to for the show, you know, and I used to like put my own name in, you know, just to try to see like what would come up. And I could not find anything. I could not find anything. And so that motivated me to start digging deeper. And what I found was somebody like in my family had changed our last name so they could get into the army. To like the benefits, you know, of being in the army back in the day. So does anyone else want to chime in? And
Brandon, when you said you couldn't find anything, do you mean going back more than 2 generations? I
mean, not even 1980s. I mean, not even 1960s. Wow. Nothing.
Does your, and again, not to make this too sort of personal, but does your family like fill out the census?
No.
Do they?
No. And you got so funny you say that because that's how I found that the name had been changed. It was through the census. Because the only person I found was a white woman with the same last name. And I was like, no. And then actually I found out, whatever. It was a bunch, it was, you kind of go into a rabbit hole if you're not white. You know, you really find out just layer after layer after layer.
In doing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
In doing my own research, I was able to track using ancestry.com. My father's side is my father was born in Honduras. His father was born in Jamaica. And I believe my paternal grandmother is from the Cayman Islands. So I was able, and I have a big family on that side, but there's no one on my mother's side. My mother had a sister. Her mother died when she was a baby. It's like literally like every generation had like one child. And they're all older now. I think my mother has like 2 cousins or something like that. And on my father's side, I have like 100 cousins. But I was able to learn a little bit about my mother's side through the census. So the census will document like who's in your home and like what year they were in your home and things like that. So that's the way I was able to sort of kind of build out my mother's side of the family, because a lot of this, she'll be 90 next month. So a lot of this, she doesn't remember like too succinctly that, you know, there was a cousin living with them or aunt living with them. But through the census, I was able to track some of that. And also through the military. The military, for obvious reasons, keeps really good records. I was able to track some people through the military. And I just want to give everyone a heads up that, why am I blanking on her name tonight? Raquel Cepeda. I know, Raquel will be here. So she's gonna get here around 7:30. So I guess she has issues also with work and things like that. So she'll stay until like 8:30.
What you're saying is, well, thank you very much. And I'm excited about Raquel coming here today, like we were with our other author. It's very exciting indeed. Yeah. And good evening to everyone, and hello everyone. Hi Brandon, hi Ron, hi John, hi everyone.
Do you remember Juanita, RG?
Yes.
It's like a family affair.
You could just call me RG, everybody, but it's great to see everybody tonight, of course.
You too.
But what I want to say, no, it's very interesting what I'm hearing, because I just want to drop a line about this. I find this very interesting because I went to ancestry.com. I tried to trace my ancestry too, and I don't trust the system, especially here from the United States. I'm tired of everything I saw. Yes, I heard about the European side. They have all my records. We're all from Spain, and I'm tired of it. So my situation is the same one like Arturo Schomburg. I'm in that same situation because all the artifacts that I got about the African side and the native side and the Caribbean side of the ethnic side of my family, I had to do that privately. The system doesn't have that in record. The only record that I always see about myself and is the one from the European one. I'm tired of Spain. I don't have anything against Spanish folks. I have nothing against Europeans, but I'm in that. That's what Arturo Schomburg said, and he had to start his own research center in his own library. And there's more to my family. There's more to my ancestry than just Spain. Okay, so I had to go out of my way to look at the real ethnic side of where my family and background is about. And it happens again and again and again. When I turned on the Spanish novelas, I don't see anyone again who looks like you, Ron. Okay? And on a contemporary level, and I know that there are more folks of especially Latino background who look like you, but here in the United States, that happens. Okay? And if you go to the Caribbean side of where our parents came from, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, well, wait, let me leave Cuba on the side because Fidel took a little bit care of that, okay? They're in, no, he kind of, yeah, Asata Shakur, she's still there in Cuba. Yeah. So we're going to leave that alone for a little while because we know why that happened also, okay? Yeah. But the Cubans know about their African ancestry real good. The Cubans don't have a problem facing up to that. Not the ones in the Cuba mainland itself. I'm not talking about the ones that are in Florida now. You see? Yeah. Okay, so we're all going to have to start our own Schomburg centers. Yeah, I think we're all going to have to do that in order to we're all going to have to start collecting our own libraries and collecting our own real artifacts because there's much more to the Latino Hispanic people than just Spain. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Right. One of the things that Raquel touches on in the book is she kind of mentions that race is more nuanced. And I don't agree with this, that in the Caribbean and South America, race is more nuanced than here in America. And I beg to differ. I think that race is as much, this sort of this hard construct in South America as it is in North America. I mean, when you look throughout South America and the Caribbean, I mean, up until recently, it felt like almost each country had a white leader, or a very light leader, whether it was Jamaica or the Latin islands, Brazil, they all had either white or the most extreme light Black person that could be elected. And I think that, that's part of our colonial history that, we think is centered in the United States when it's actually throughout this hemisphere.
Yep, agree. Yes, I think for me, this is great.
I agree.
I've always been interested in finding out about my ancestors, especially because in the Dominican Republic, the Black people and the indigenous people have sort of been erased from the history. When you learn stuff in school there, it's always like the indigenous people, they all died. They all disappear, which is not true. And the Black people they went to Haiti, it's like, no, they did not. And so I've always been very curious. I never done anything like Ancestry because I don't think they would have, I don't know, information from
for the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. An uncle of mine who did. You go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you for having me here because I don't know anybody here. But
we're all new.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. I know for my family, we are African descent, and but the traditions and all the history has been passed down orally. So we go back, we can trace back like 4 or 5 generations, and we've kept it in the family. My mother now, like her and her brothers and sisters, they're the eldest now. And my mother seems to be the gatekeeper of all the history. So once a year, we have family reunions in North Carolina. And so it's about 4 or 5 generations. And even my children now, they're younger, they know who their great grandparents are. And we have lots of pictures and we all pay homage to them. So, and I know you guys mentioned Ancestry. They do have a large database, but we try to go on Ancestry to see if we can find anything else. And everything they had, we already had it. And we actually had more than what they had. So it's kind of interesting to hear a lot of everyone's stories. And just like Bree was talking about, when one person is telling the story or one source is telling the story, it gets really skewed and it just seems like the erasure of all other cultures, you know.
You know, you and your family should do some sort of master class on how to maintain that ancestry. Like,
yes, please. Yeah, I never even thought about that because I just grew up like that. And that's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
We have lots of pictures. We have lots of history.
The most important thing is that your children, you're passing it down, if you will, to your children. So they don't have to, you know, go through the stories we're telling today. They'll just grow up with it.
Right. So a lot of it is from my mother's maternal side and her paternal side. We still have the land in the family that my great-great-grandfather bought. And there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us. So when we go to family reunions during the summertime, there's about 150. Just, you know, continuously coming. You see the same folks all the time.
You're so lucky. Like, I'm so jealous of you randomly. Like, I'm not jealous. I'm just, I'm envious and hurt that I don't.
I say that just to, you know, just keep digging because you'll find it. You'll find something. All you need is one link and then you just keep on and don't stop.
Yes.
You'll find it.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Miss Juanita, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I want to chime in because it's something that Teresa mentioned, photographs, right? I think that's so amazing. My brother was here. I think it was before the pandemic. But he had, I'm actually Puerto Rican, that's my background, but my family's from the coast, 2 towns in Puerto Rico. And what we know from family, it was passed orally to my grandfather and my grandmother. They both died. But my brother had this brilliant idea of trying to piece together, like we'll sit down with them on the porch and ask them about, you know, so who's your mother and who's the mother of that person or your father? And it's interesting because the way my brother pieced down these things was by collecting baptism records or if there's anything like that, which, you know, that were not accurate because a child will be born and then years later will be registered. So there was a lot of difficulty for him and other people to kind of like piece together this information. And we want to know because everybody in Puerto Rico has these ideas about Spain, but I'm more curious to know about, and actually I do have an idea of who my great-grandparents were and great-grandparents, but my brother and father were the ones that pieced that together. And then we have this for our children and the cousins, but it's very interesting how there's a fragmentation and a difficulty in trying to get this information from all these other sources. We haven't done any ancestry thing or any genetic testing. My brother was going to records, but it was, and we don't have photographs of many of these family members. In fact, we have here in the house, right, a photo of my grandfather and my grandmother on my father's side. There's no photos of my grandparents until I guess my mother got married. So that's another thing that I find particularly interesting. And a lot of it was passed down by, you know, we'll sit down with grandma and grandpa and talk about. So what was like it was this kind of casual conversations that we recorded, but nothing that we have is like a written record. And not too long ago, we were watching Louis Gates' program of the African diaspora in the Caribbean. And it was very interesting to see how that was pieced together and how to circle back to what Ron was saying about nuanced differences between races. I think we do have these very tense, very complicated relationship to Blackness. My mom always say no one wants to be Black in Puerto Rico, and I do believe her. I was more brought up like that because from the coast, that's how we learn to identify ourselves. But I was also thinking of how through that history of colonialism, a lot of these biases and ways of kind of classifying people by skin tone, by hair texture, just created more subdivisions and some distancing between that European heritage and then your African roots. So I thought that was very interesting. And of course, when I moved here to the States, I said, you know what, that's a different, it's not different, but it's an experience that I don't have living in the United States, coming from the Caribbean, but I just think racism is racism. And all the institutions that decide to I don't know, that were there to kind of keep it in place were connected to, you know, sugarcane, coffee, all these other ways of exploiting other people. And I'm gonna pause there because then
otherwise is what I hear.
Go ahead, Lake.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually a first generation American, but my parents come from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. I have such an issue, or growing up, I had such an issue trying to identify. It's funny hearing everyone's different takes and everyone's different ages as well, and different places that we are coming from. We're all coming from the same place. But I find it funny, and I say funny on purpose, because it's really coming from a place of greed, and it's an epicenter of so much more than us as humans and people. So I think it's crazy that we're even in a discussion across generations, across different origins of what greed can get you from, or what greed can leave at the end of the day. Just so much chaos and so much confusion. My father definitely instilled in me a big, I guess, understanding of where I come from, but it's still like a big question mark, because I have direct lineage to Taínos, and I've never been to Puerto Rico though. So I don't know anyone that's on the island. I went to DR once, and that was on a weekend kind of trip. So I didn't get to visit any of my family there. So I feel so disconnected. And once I read this book, I felt seen, for sure. That was one. But two, I felt like I couldn't do what she did, which was go back and find certain ancestry, because she actually was able to go back to the island. She was doing that since she was a kid. So that disconnect is where I find myself at. And then what we were talking about, the fact that things were burned down, things were spoken about in secret, you had to hide things, so then things get lost. But I found the biggest thing for me and my family is that Americans didn't care, right? When migrants would come, and I know for sure my family, their names were changed, their birthdays were changed. So they left their island one person, and they came in a different person. So then when it comes to tracking, I'm not sure if this links to anybody, and maybe they have advice as to how I could do that. But when it comes to tracking and figuring out like how where my people are truly from, past like just the small things that I do know and the connections I do have, and the small stories that I do have from my dad's childhood or my mom's childhood. I really just know about their past and about their lineage. And I only have my grandmother and my grandfather of my Dominican side left, but the Dominican side can be a little more racist than my Puerto Rican side. And not to say my grandparents are racist, but they never wanted to try to keep that information. They weren't taught to. My Puerto Rican side was for sure, but they're no longer with me. So I'm a little stuck as to how to even go down Raquel's path, because that's ultimately what I would like. And I didn't even think about that until y'all started talking about it.
Well, you know what? That's a perfect segue, because she just joined us, the woman of the hour, Raquel. And you know, it's so funny. I just want to say one quick thing, you know, looking at you, Lake. One thing my mother would say, and if ever my mother's biracial, half Black, half white, and she would just always have this saying, like in the hair salon, like whenever you're questioning who you are, you can't hide your afro. So I don't know if she made that up or if that's something like comes from somewhere, but you can't hide an afro. So Ron, did you want to introduce Raquel briefly?
Just a quick introduction. Raquel Cepeda is joining us this evening. She is the author of Bird of Paradise, How I Became Latina. But she's written other books. She writes on hip hop and music and culture. She's made films about gender identity. I don't want to call it the history of gangs, but La Madrina looks at one person who sort of came up through the gang culture. And it resonates with me because I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up on Trinity Avenue, which a lot of people think in the Bronx is like one of the birthplaces of gangs and stuff like that. So, but we won't, go too far. Raquel can speak for herself, but this book club discussion started to like really go into her book. And from there, like, as I introed earlier, we don't have to talk about the book at all. We can talk about the subject matter of the book. And that's what we've been doing most of the evening, going back and bouncing off the book, but really looking at what it means to be, in quotes, whatever you are, and how that identity is shaped. So Raquel is here. I don't know if she wants to say a few words, if we just want to jump in and with questions. Raquel?
You're muted. You're still muted.
You're still muted, Raquel.
Hi.
There you go.
So thanks for having me. I wanted to say hello in particular just to two people that I see here, at least that I'm friends with, John and Juanita Ahern. I want to say what's up. I'm a big admirer of their art and of them as people. And I just wanted to acknowledge that they were in the house. And I wanted to thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm ready. I don't like talking about myself too much. So I'm ready. I want to hear about, you all. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to, to talk to you about that. But I don't want to use this time to go on and on and on about me.
Raquel's such a writer. We got a real author in the room, guys. So, I'll start off. I like to start off all of the author questions as the same, and then I'll kind of fall back. And if anyone has a question, it's not too formal, you can just kind of speak up. So Raquel, if you just want to start us off by maybe talking about what were some of your motivations in writing this particular memoir? We know you've written a lot of other things, a lot of interviews, but what were your motivations behind the memoir?
Well, number one, I tend to try to fill spaces that I don't see filled. And I've never read anything that was, except for like, and I'm not even sure at the time her memoir was published, but the Dominican, from what I've, as far as Dominican American authors go, we're kind of known for novels. And I've not read in the popular market, at least in a non-academic space, a memoir, a nonfiction by a Dominican American. And so therefore I said I should write it. because there's, we're part of the American narrative. We're part of the fabric that makes this city ebb and flow. The first person of color who was a non-indigenous person of color to live in New York was born in the colonial city, in Santo Domingo, en la ciudad colonial. So to me, being Dominican is being, a New Yorker in many ways. And that's, also the essence of belonging. And I believe that, though we're othered, that we are very much part of this fabric. And so I decided to contribute to it. And also, I was really always interested in identity and, race identity, because, especially from where I come from, because I find that with Dominican American culture, we tend to be put in a binary. Yes, we do have issues with race, because we all have issues with race. I know Black Americans have issues with race, in colorism. We're kind of brushed with we're painted with broad strokes, but we're all so different. So when it's funny when I see things happen, like, any kind of something will happen with a Dominican American person in the neighborhood, and suddenly, they're Dominican, they all hate Blacks, they all hate Haitians, they all hate, and I'm like, yeah, I hate Haitians. I'll start with my husband, my children, you know what I mean? Like, so I think it's interesting how the oppressed, communities that come from oppression tend to start oppressing other communities. So that's one of the things that made me very interested in this too, this dichotomy, this binary space that we kind of get forced into when we come to the States. I'm also driven by my own father's self-loathing, and also by my grandmother, who actually just passed away a couple months ago, about, how she was and her own struggles with identity, and just, what being from two countries, and the Caribbean and here, how that informed me. I wanted to share, because I'm not the only person who has this kind of story. You know what I mean? So I wanted to share, and that's the way I felt like I should start the conversation. And in short, if you ask me the same question tomorrow, I'll give you another answer. That'll sound completely different. But as I am located in this space right now, that's what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there can be many motivations, and there should, right? Intention is not just like in a vacuum. It's many, many things get you to create. So thank you so much for that.
It's funny, before my grandmother, like when I first told my grandmother, I'm writing this book or whatever, she started laughing. And then she started laughing. She had this little cackle, because she was like very small. She was like 4'11", like really tiny. It was like laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing at, Mama? And she said, when you were 6 years old and you were running around the house here in Santo Domingo, anytime you'd get mad at us, you would tug on my skirt and say, one day I'm going to write a book about this family and set the record straight. And then she said, I don't give a shit what you write about me. I live my life for myself. And this is a very proper woman. So it just makes me laugh, it makes me laugh, but here we are.
Does anyone want to jump in with a question, Lake?
Jump in. I'm actually a writer myself, which is what made me really feel called to be a part of this Zoom. So thanks for the facility. And I just mentioned, I don't know if you were in on the call when I did say, I was definitely seen when I read your book. So I struggled with identity growing up. So it was really nice to not only find some type of community where I am right now, where I work. I'm director of intentional relationships here at Abundance Academy of the Arts. So I am always around Black and Brown children, and I teach throughout arts and education programs with them. And I'm also a yoga instructor. So I teach these kids how to breathe and, not let all this oppression oppress them. And my biggest thing right now is I'm working on children's books, and I want to get them at the youngest and really get them to understand not only like their feelings, and if even their family doesn't necessarily know how to handle those things because they weren't taught, maybe somehow we can learn together while we read a book, you know what I mean? And a part of it now is also wanting a small child like me not be confused about who they are in America, in New York, in Brooklyn, in Sunset Park, or in Harlem, or like or even in some white spaces as well, because I actually grew up in Brooklyn per se, but all of my schools were in Manhattan, and all of my schools were performing arts programs. And I was very much in affluent places. So that was another reason why I was like, so what am I? What is this? I was wondering if you had anything other than what you've already kind of inspired me in saying, like, it's, you know, your story is what you just decided, like, there's not enough people doing this. That's kind of the same reason why I feel like children's stories needs to be there. But I'm not sure what my question is. I feel like it's, I think it's more so trying to ask, like, what would be the best advice in starting something like that, in starting the conversation specifically for children, because it's such a big thing to like chew on for even adults. I did see one children's book recently that someone sent me because they knew that I would like it. It was the Dominicans are something, Dominicans of color or something.
Oh, wow.
Is
it a book that's published in DR or here?
I think it's published here. So let me see if Dominicans in color children's book. Power of Google. Oh, if Dominican were a color.
Oh, wow.
And there's
I'd like
also
to see that. I'm gonna look it up.
There's also Island Born. It's If Dominican Were a Color is written by Cili Recio, I think is how you pronounce. And then there's Lola and Island Born by Juno Diaz. And there's another one called Santo Domingo is what I'm just seeing. But it kind of explains the, like, on Island Born, there's a little brown girl with 4C hair. Like, that caters to it. But yeah, I was wondering if you had any advice in how to start something so deep.
You start within yourself and you start writing. I've written over the years many like chapters, and I would just delete them. I would start and stop and start and stop and start, because I was more entrenched in the journalism world when magazines were a thing, you know, and I would come into the office early and I would go in, I would write, and then I would just be like, oh, this is terrible. This is bullshit. I'm a terrible writer. Oh my God, I suck. I would delete it, start over again. And it's just like that kind of a process. There's no magic pill. You know what I mean? You just have to start. You know what I mean? You have to start.
Okay. I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to chime in, Ron?
I just wanted to speak to Lake and also Raquel. You know, access is so easy now. Access won't make you a great writer, but you have social media and websites and blogs, and you have many of these platforms that are looking for content now where you can kind of, like, you know, get your chops down and, I don't want to say practice writing on someone else's dime, but, you know, you can get experience because there's just more outlets. I don't know if it's better, but there are more outlets.
Well, I think for something personal like what you're trying to do, I would just start writing. You don't have to publish it. You just start writing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I do find that even though there are more outlets online, it's harder to be published because, you know, I hate to romanticize sometimes the past because we sound, you know, like, I mean, there are things that were better in the past and things that are better today, right? So we got to find a balance in everything, right? But, you know, I personally love paper, and I love, like, you know, the Village Voice. And when I was in schools that had apathetic teachers, you know, I would pick up the Village Voice and all these other papers, and I would read them through, you know, during English class and try to teach myself by the people that I liked. And one of my big inspirations was like Greg Tate, and who just passed away and was a good friend of mine. And also, you know, like just the writers that I used to love writing when I didn't have to look at the name of the person, when you just could tell by their voice what they sounded like. And I think that you get into the practice of developing your voice, not necessarily when you're publishing and having to alter your voice to fit the demographic, but just start writing. Just start writing.
Yeah, I'm definitely
and don't feel pressure. Don't pressure yourself because everybody thinks they suck.
Okay.
Every writer. every artist.
I definitely am in the process of just like, it feels like babies that I need a birth. Yeah. So I'm like putting the seeds and working on that, but that actually was exactly what I needed to hear about. It does sound like I'm trying to figure out my voice, and like I know how I sound talking. I'm from Brooklyn. I will always sound like this, but on paper, it sounds so different. And so I haven't figured that part out. So that's super helpful that I just have to just keep writing and talk to myself, I guess.
Awesome. Did someone else, Teresa? Teresa, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that your book is so powerful on so many levels. I'm actually teaching the book right now this semester in my class. I teach in a transfer school, and I think the voice is so authentic, and my students really are relating to the book. There's a lot of, pieces in the book that they can see themselves in it, and they identify right away. I'm actually a science teacher, but I'm doing like a science literature class because they've heard about cells and microscopes for like 12 years already, and they're just trying to, advance to the next step. So this way I can teach them the science part, which is the DNA part towards the end of the book, and explain that. And the kids are really receptive because although I'm a science teacher, a biology teacher, I should have been an English teacher, but it's just not enough time to read right now. But
Teresa, did you have a question? I don't want to cut you off, but we only have a short amount of time.
Okay, all right. So my question is, how do we get our students, our young people, to be aware of all the things that you've spoken about in this book? Because it's happening to them in real time.
But I think a good exercise, and I've done this in a school before, is to encourage them to write. And then to share the stories, and sometimes share the stories where who wrote it, but maybe they don't like read who, unless they want to share.
Okay.
Because I like turning like classrooms into like writing groups, like mini writing groups. Like, I think that whether it's poetry or long form or it's a song or whatever, I found that once, or if it's a story and a painting with it, I found that, that really works to kind of, give the student agency and to, to uplift their own voices. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I've had a good time. I had a great time doing that. I've done that in 2 schools with students, and I always I kind of tend to do well with students that have paraprofessionals or usually are problem children. I tend to work well with them.
Yeah.
Because most of the time what it is that they're just they're choking. They're trying to get their frustrations or get what they're feeling out, and they just can't because, number one, they don't know how to articulate it. Number two, they're negotiating life at home with all that stress. And this is before the pandemic, with all that stress. And then negotiating our school system, which we all know can be super xenophobic and racist and whatnot. Yes. And also, negotiating the world that they live in and the signals that adults are giving them. So if you create a space in the class that, they can share their books, share their stories, they can also take part in this. I don't have to be the only one writing stories. They can take part in it. And I think when I've done that with 2 classes in particular, I found that it was empowering, and I still even keep in touch with some of the kids today. So, some of them want to be writers, some of them want to do other things, but it just kind of, it doesn't matter if you're a good writer or not a great writer, but it's just about getting it out there and showing them that they matter at this age, at the age that, I find it very, 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 very important.
Thank you.
That's thank you so much for asking that question, Teresa, because that is a great question, but a really powerful answer. And I know there are a lot of teachers and a lot of counselors in this room. So hopefully we can all take a little bit of that answer, including an old professor of mine, Miss Tracy Ann Williams, who I didn't even realize was in here, y'all. She's probably a big reason that I'm able to sit here and facilitate this course from the things that she taught me. So does anyone else have a question? If not, I have one that I think. Oh, yes, go ahead, Ms. Jackie.
Okay, good evening. First of all, just Ms. Cepeda, I just want to thank you. As a fellow Dominican, very, very proud to to have you bring this type of story to all of us and expose us that way, to just show, right, the kind of things that we can do. The question I have for you is, did you research when you decided to take on this memoir? Did those things come easily to your memory? Were you able to keep all that recollection of what you had lived in the DR and the experiences, or did you go back and research? Particularly, I'm thinking about the esoteric kind of spiritual aspect of the book that you present. How did that process go for you?
The spiritual has been with me since I was a little girl. You know, in our culture, as you know, some of us are, you know, we count our gifts in sometimes different ways in our mainstream society here in the West does. So, you know, I've had that relationship and I was very comfortable with that relationship from the time I can remember having a consciousness. It runs in one side of my family that I know of. So I would say at least one. Some of the stuff was a mixture of, you know, my memory and also my, you know, interviewing people that were in my family that were bearing witness. A major source was my uncle, my birth mother's father, who was there to see the whole thing. And he was just kind of like amazed that I would remember all the things that I remembered, down to like what people were wearing and smells and what was being cooked in the kitchen when these things were happening. And actually I remembered so much that it kind of triggered him. It was like, you know, it was a process for him that kind of like, you know, brought things up that he didn't want to relive. Like, you know, like for example, his life, you know, living in the closet, if you will, in Santo Domingo. And the things that he had to go through with his own father, right? So, you know, but those are the things that I wasn't there that I had to research. And I researched not only his story, but I went ahead and, you know, and I you know, I got for example, I learned about the red light district in Santo Domingo at the time. You know, I was able to interview, you know, all kinds of people historians that knew what was going, you know, what was happening. And, you know, a lot of it, again, yes, was recollection and interviews. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's why I always say, and I write in the intro, you know, in the author's note, you know, we're all located in different spaces, right? You and I could have been sisters and we could have, you know, had similar things happen to us, but you will see it in a completely different way than I would, because we're located in different spaces. So how we experience, how we experience these things depends on how we're located at a specific time, how we're located, you know, from a place of gender, spirituality, space, geography, and all these other things, all these intersections.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to chime in? Ms. Juanita? No? You know, I have a question that I'd like to ask you. And if anyone else wants to chime in after this, please do. You know, I'm wondering if you can talk about, because it is tricky writing your own memoir, but can you talk about if there was any type of vulnerability that came up when you were doing the documentary, La Madrina, and researching someone else's past and presenting someone else's story? What did that spark anything for you as an artist, especially writing a memoir?
I wrote that before, actually, when she read Madrina, her name is Lorene, when she read the book is what sealed the deal for her. So she said, okay, we're going to do this film together, because I could see that, you know, you've been through some of the things that I've been through. You're one of us. It's not like, I don't feel like we're like, you know, we're going to have like, you know, people come into the hood, they basically treat the subjects like they're zoo, you know, like they're like zoo animals, right? You go in there, you watch, oh, it's so cool, you know, I'm in the hood, I'm like, you know, and then you leave and you make your film. I could walk to her house, you know, so I've, you know, she understood where I was coming from after she read it, but I took a year before I even turn on the camera, which I usually do, just to get to know the subject. And I'm always encouraging them, like, use your gut. You know, if you trust me and you think this is going to be good, let's do this together. You know what I mean? We got to take, you know, but I want to tell her story because for me, she's an archetype of the women that raised me and the women that made sure I was here to survive my own childhood. So for me, I told her, I said, you know, I'm so driven. I'm like obsessed with telling this story because I feel like telling your story is helping me kind of say that people like you and like the people that, you know, like I dedicated my book to, who the woman's name, her real name was Margie, you know, like that they existed, you know, and they existed in these spaces that were on the fringe of the margins, but they existed and they made a difference in somebody's life. And that's what we're here to do. So for me, it was kind of seamless. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It feels seamless. When you watch the movie and you read the book, it's almost impossible to separate the two. It feels like,
it's funny because a lot of, when you see her as a young person, a lot of people thought that we were related.
You look a lot alike. I was thinking that you look a lot alike. It's very difficult, you know, reading your story about your mother and then watching that documentary. It's tricky not to even, you know, I'm not related to either of you at all. And it was hard for me to not see, it almost oozed off of it. I wanted to weirdly, oddly, even though it was so much struggle and so much pain, I oddly wanted to be a part of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
Well, the way that we framed the struggle and the pain was not in a place of defeat.
Right.
Right. And that's one of the things that she and I both talked about. And also that how we both see my story and her story, you know, is that we're not somebody, you know, we're not people who succumbed to our struggles. Me personally, I wouldn't change a day in my life if it brought me to this moment. Not a single day would I have changed in my life if it brought me to this moment where I'm here in the Zoom. So, you know, for me, it's like, you know, and she is that way as well. And, you know, I'm telling you, I mean, out of any project that I made, she has been my favorite. And actually, I think a lot of people are going to end up seeing the film because there's going to be an announcement in the next couple of weeks of where you can watch it. So I'm hoping that more people can identify, you know, and see them, they could see themselves in her. I feel like our stories are universal. I think that that's what binds us as people, you know, as New Yorkers, as Americans, you know, across so many lines. I think one of the things that unites us as humans is our sheer will and our ability to survive, our survival skills.
And finding the celebration in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I remember, and I was telling Lorene this a couple of months ago, when I went to Sierra Leone to make my first film. It was called Bling, A Planet Rock. It used to be on Netflix a long time ago. It premiered in 2000, I think 7 or 8 on VH1. It was produced by the United Nations Development Program and VH1. And I took Tego Calderon, Raekwon, the chef, and Paul Wall to Sierra Leone to see the effects of, you know, of blinging and how blinging culture intersected with the conflict. And I remember going up country, couple of maybe it was an hour up country from Freetown, and seeing people there, and people were struggling, and some people were amputees and people were still in the alluvial mines, but they found moments to laugh. They found moments to joke. They find moments to have children. They find moments to keep humanity going. And to me, that was crazy inspiring, because that's what it's about. No matter what, no matter how dark things look, the human will find a way to overcome.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
I have a question. How did the story of Lorene sort of come to your attention? Like, what connected you?
Couple of different streams, right? My mentor and also my producing partner, his name is Henry Chalfant. He made a film called Style Wars. Style Wars was the first hip hop documentary. And it was the film that made actually not only me, but my husband want to make films. And we both ended up working with him. After Style Wars, he made a film with a public school teacher named Rita Fetcher it's called Flying Cut Sleeves. You can find it on YouTube. Anytime somebody takes it down, somebody else puts it up. It's a film about the 80s and about what happened to folks after they got, they became civilians, if you will, after they got out of their street families or out of the outlaw world, and started raising families of their own. And she was part of that, but it was much more male centric. So he would always tell me, you should meet Lorene, man. She reminds me of you. Like, you guys remind me, you should just always meet. And that happened for a couple of years. And finally, I went to see another film and she was there and I introduced myself. And then, it was kind of like, respect at first sight. It was like, okay, all right, I see you. And then, then I also saw her for a second in another film, which is like a cult classic. It's called 80 Blocks from Tiffany's, and it's a cult classic. It was produced by Lorne Michaels. It's made by Gary Weiss. And it was supposed to be a short on SNL back in the 70s, but it ended up becoming its own feature, okay? And in that, Lorene has like a little small bit in it, right? Because it was about her then husband and her club and her, street family. So I always said, man, all these films are like, that I see now and, made in the last few years are kind of romanticizing violence, romanticizing, brown struggle and fighting and, and kind of like swinging dicks, if you will, right? And I'm sorry for my language, but it's just how I see it. And I call it like I see it. And, and how about the women? How about what they had to go through? How about like, all of their struggles and Lorene to me always felt like she was somebody who had more to say, but it was just never made it in. So Henry found outtakes from Flying Cut Sleeves. And I'm like, dude, you didn't put the best shit in the film. We're going to make this film because this is the best stuff. So then, and then I found something that Rye in Italy made, an Italian PBS style network made about her. So I started finding these things started coming to me. And I said, it's kismet, it's destiny. I have to be the one to tell the story. So, that's how, and then when I met with her, we got to know each other and I just, we just got more enmeshed. We just found that we had more and more and more things in common. And she trusted me and her friends trusted me to tell the story because a lot of times she knew I wouldn't make her out to be a caricature.
And that's why it's so important to not only tell your own stories, but tell your mentor stories, right? Tell the stories of the people on your block. Don't wait till Alan Lomax, no beef with Alan Lomax, but don't wait till a white photographer pulls up to tell your story. That's so important. That's so important. Thanks for asking that question, Ron.
I have to say one thing. Henry Chalfant is a white man, but Henry Chalfant is an ally. And Henry Chalfant has been there and supported artists of color more sometimes than we've supported each other. Mm-hmm. So I just always want to give praise because I wouldn't be here. My husband wouldn't be making the films he's making and he wouldn't have had his career had it not been for the push of somebody that actually saw us. Didn't try to change us, just saw us.
I don't know Henry well, but I used to work at the Bronx Museum for many years. Oh. And he screened Star Wars there. And he just had a big exhibition, maybe a few years ago.
Right before COVID.
Right. He spent his early years photographing trains, the graffiti. And he did a huge exhibition at the Bronx Museum of those images. And they were superimposed on small graffiti cars or train cars, excuse me. Juanita?
Yeah, what I wanted to add is that actually circling back to that, I was the night that Henry was presenting Flying Cut Sleeves, actually, and I didn't know this very well. Lorene was she was in the audience. Yes. And what's fascinating, that felt like a love fest, like these, the people that were in the film were actually there. And I'm like, John, what is this? I was there with my notebook taking notes and it was super impressive to feel and experience that. But the other thing too that I think Raquel mentioned before was that I'm teaching a class where I'm actually finishing this where kids are making portraits, and it's a delight to hear them tell stories and how they celebrate their themselves right here, and they're driving the whole creative card. The other thing too that I think it's amazing about watching La Madrina, which we did and we really enjoy, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight, is that when I take the bus, sometimes I sit next to a lady and then they're telling me things like, I don't know, they just want to share with you. And that humanity, that aspect of their daily struggles, like, oh, I'm coming from the doctor, or help me with my walker. When I watch La Madrina, I can relate to the stories of people that I see every day, that I encounter or that I run into. And it's really what gets me about the film, but also how it ties all these commonality that we have in terms of existing every day, in the nuisance of everyday life. So I just want to mention that, because when I watch it, I said, oh my God, that's that lady that was telling me everything about her medical appointment and asked me what I was cooking for dinner tonight. And I was like, oh my God, how do we become friends on this bus ride, right? But I'm beginning to take the bus with people sometimes, depending where I'm in the Bronx. And I'm like, oh, there's the lady that I saw that day that I helped with the walker. But I just want to mention that to you, because it's just like living with abuelitas, madrinas, and comadres. And we all can relate to that, you know, so.
Juanita, were you there for the Q&A after the Flying Cut Sleeves screening?
I think so. Because I think Benji was there, and also was the son of Rita. And it was very touching to hear them talk. Like, these people have a long-term lifetime relationship, which is something that I think it just escapes people.
That's the thing, yeah.
People, you know, open their door, and there's a bond of trust there. So that was really.
That's the thing, that Henry stayed in touch for decades with Lorene. He's the only filmmaker that stayed in touch with her.
Amazing, because she was there sitting. She had her grandkids and great grandkids there, and I was thinking, what is this family reunion? But it had that warmth feel to it. So that was actually really touching, and something that, you know, if you arrange it, it won't happen. So.
Did anyone else want to chime in?
I put a link to Flying Cut Sleeves, the full, in the chat. That you have access to the chat, you can watch it on YouTube. I believe I didn't start it yet. One of the things that just to kind of touch on the book, is the pacing. Like, you almost couldn't put the book down. Like, you might, even though you're reading, it felt like if I put the book down, I might miss something. And I was wondering, the pacing almost felt like a movie, in the sense that a movie has two hours, or give or take, to tell a full story. And the pacing of the book felt like that also, even though the book is much longer. Was that intentional, or is that just your writing style?
That's my writing style. It's kind of aggressive. And it's just my, you know, and I just made a promise to myself to write the way I speak, and deliver it like I'm telling a story, like I'm sitting down with you and telling a story. And I just kept to that. And I feel like I kept to that more in part one, which is my favorite part of the book. And though I love part two because I love the science, but, you know, like just reliving that other stuff and immortalizing the people that that raised me basically in Inwood and Washington Heights. You know, like I had a great time going back down to that memory, you know, going back down memory lane and reliving some of those moments.
Yeah, I just started part two now, so those comments are based on reading part one. That pacing was definitely there.
It's funny too, because it's like a palpitation, like a heart palpitation. It's like, you know, when your heart palpitates. And I remember always like wanting to try to find a way with the pacing to kind of like mimic how I was feeling growing up. Like always feeling like anxious, or always feeling like I had to keep your fists up. And, you know, and not knowing what would happen around the corner, you know, at any given time, and kind of, you know, like fending for yourself and raising yourself in a way. So that I was trying to keep that, you know, that beat. I listened to a lot of music when I was writing.
And you speak very frankly too. You speak very frankly, like you are, like it's not edited, like it's not filtered. And I'm wondering, did you hear any backlash from your family or the community, the people that you speak with, the people that are spoken about in this book?
I changed names because I do believe, I know, like, I don't think it's fair to like put, people live their lives with you, not for you to like put, like air them out. So, I changed some names in the book, and nobody, like people, from what I understand, my birth mother was taken aback because it brought back, she said, my God, how does she remember all that? Because it's exactly how it happened. She was like, this is, and we don't speak, but, family members have told me like, like, wow, she's like, she just can't believe it. Like, she just can't, somebody caught her just staring down at the book and not, just staring, like not even reading, just staring down. And, the son, I still keep in touch with some of the people that are in the book. And, some people are like, yo, went down memory lane. It was a lie, it was when we survived, like nobody's had anything, crazy to say. I did receive one weird, email from somebody that was an abuser to my birth mother that I wrote about, but that didn't bother me because it happened and it's what it is. And, what are you going to do? So, I wanted to make sure that I kept it real with myself. I thought about the writer Jill Nelson when she said, keep the faith, but not the secrets. So, I just like to, just like, and also if you don't like write frankly, and in the book, I also, if I'm unflattering with somebody else, I also keep it real about myself. And I feel that comes with age and that comes with life experience. And if you're not going to present yourself as a whole person and present the story in fullness, the way you would in a documentary or a film, hopefully, then I shouldn't be writing. I wasn't ready to tell the story. And as far as the style of writing, I had an editor come over to my house and she said, oh, I had notes, like she's like an old school editor that I had hired on top of my editor to like, just, to work with me on craft. And she said, I came in with all these notes and I'm throwing them away. And I'm like, why? She said, because you speak exactly how you write. And I don't want you to change that. I don't, I was going to encourage you to tamp it down or to like, be more like kind of old school, like what you learn in school. But she was like, you're shifting, you're pushing language forward. So, even with the Spanish, the Dominican, what I wrote Spanish phonetically, the way, Dominicanismos. So you're not going to find them in a dictionary that's going to have more like of the Spaniard type of Spanish. So, I've seen a complaint where, oh, she's not, she's misspelling Spanish words. I said that I would in the beginning of the book. And I did say that I wanted to write phonetically. There's certain things you just can't write them. There's no language for it.
Yeah, we spoke about that actually. A member brought that up, a Dominican woman. That was the first thing she said actually last week. Does anyone else want to chime in? Someone else had their mic off.
Yeah, one thing that I want to say is that's actually the one thing that I really appreciated that from your book, that you were not afraid to use some of those so-called cultural slangs. Those are just cultural expressions to me. And I think it's wonderful to have an author that would dare to actually publish in the actual everyday languages that are used by that particular type of people. So that's actually one very impressive thing that I did appreciate from your book, because very often when I read books from ethnic culture, authors seem to shy away from actually bringing and using terms, and those are slangs, and yes, but every culture has its own particular way of expressions. And I actually appreciated the fact that you dare to acknowledge those type of expressions in your book. It's the type of book that, like Ron said recently, I wasn't able to put it down. I read your book in 2 days. It was like an addiction. almost once you
Oh,
pick
a good addiction. So yeah, I try to put context clues when I use slang, but for some, you know, oh, she didn't write, she hired somebody from Dominican, I'm gonna misspell words. I did it on purpose. So I don't explain it. If you didn't, you know, catch it, then I guess you can't catch everything.
Right. Yasmin, you're more than welcome to pop in whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Hi. So I'm so honored to be here tonight. Let me be really honorable and take the camera off too. Hi. Because that just feels really not nice to be like, I'm so honored and just look at my picture. I read your book a long time ago, but it really was really impactful to me in so many ways, which you shared. But I had two questions that I wanted to ask. I'm a writer myself. So I loved what you were, so my first question is a writing question about an editor. Like, I love that you got two, which I'm like, all right, that's what's up. But how do you find an editor that's right for you? Like, so for example, I had a friend of mine and she asked me to like support her with her poetry book, right? Which was really challenging, you know, to like help her to arrange the poems that she wanted to put out there for publication, right? And that was difficult because she was my friend. So I liked a lot of her work, but I'm not sure what exactly, you know, where would this be like the best place for her work? Is this the best way to display what she was looking for? Because I'm looking at it from my perspective as her friend and liking her work, opposed to like maybe a reader, right? So that's one way. But I'm just like, I feel like I want someone to be open to, I want to be open to what they have to bring to the table. But at the same time, I don't want folks that are like trying to make me into something that I know my words should not be. So I'm wondering like advice you can give about knowing when you found the right editor, you know, like the right person for your work, or is it different for each project? So I'm sorry,
definitely different. No, it's okay. It's different for every single project, every single place that I used to contribute to as a journalist. It's always different. I would say I got lucky because I had, you know, I have a fantastic literary agent who used to be my editor for another book. And then my editor, you know, was kind of hands off, you know, she was just hands off, and I wanted to work on it. So with my agent, I found an editor, and then I had to pitch the story to her because she was so busy. And then, you know, and then she read it, she came over. And then, and the other thing, it was very challenging because I actually I submitted my book, and less than like 6 or 7 days later, I had my son. And then 2 weeks later, I went into the edit. Whoa. So it was very challenging. Yeah. So she came to my house because of that, you know, like, or I didn't go to her office, but she came over and she was just like, you know, I had notes, but I'm not giving them to you. I'm just not. So it really depends. You have to like, you know, it depends on how you vibe with the people around you. Writing groups are good. If you find a circle of people that you actually, if you find a writing group where you don't know anyone, that may be good, because then it doesn't get personal. You know, communities have them. You can find them in library. You could inquire with your library or you know, cultural groups in the neighborhood. You know, they're out there.
Thank you for that.
We have so many artists.
That's true. That is true. My second question is more in regards to, it's like a two-parter. My second question is more in regards to like, if whatever you're willing to share or you feel open to share, and you kind of already answered it in like dealing with stuff that's challenging that, you know, that involve other people, right? And like your depiction of them. So you somewhat answered that for me, but I was wondering if you had a process that you went through to get to that space. You know, like, or whether or not you already were like, I'm gonna tell my story and this is how it is. Because I'm just wondering about that for myself, because there's certain things I want to definitely write, but I'm just like, my memory of it is one thing, and I might have the grace of an adult now that has like the grace of understanding of whatever has happened, and people make mistakes. But if I'm writing it honestly from that period, then it doesn't have that grace. So I was wondering if you had a process for that.
Well, number one, I write in the present. Even if I write a pitch deck for something today, I write in the present. Always write in the present, because I don't like when I read like, you know, I'm 9 years old and this happened to me, but you know, now in hindsight, I understood my father was, you know, I'm making this up. My father was on drugs, so he didn't know better. That's not putting me in the moment. Be always right in the present tense. Always, always, always when you can write in the present tense. So somebody can be on a ride with you. And I found that in the beginning when I was like, I'm going to write this book, even before I pitched it, I'm going to write this. I'm going to start writing this. When I started looking at other people's processes, when I was like researching, I found that that bogged me down. And when I just said, fuck it, I'm going to start writing is when I was free.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What I did was I made sure I had a routine. I made sure I would get up, I'd go I'd go to my boxing gym, get some sparring in, go into the office, write for an hour, make sure I stopped. You know, you always have like a thing that you do every day, you treat it like work. And even if I'm like, oh, I can't write anything, I'm like in front of my computer, I can't do it, I'm going to read something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something that's going to help me push it forward. But awesome. I can't get too into what other people do, because then for me, it didn't work.
Yeah. So we got about 8 minutes left, and I do want to get
Thank you so much.
Questions.
Oh, thank you.
Gree, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to say to Raquel that I thank you for writing from your true self and your authentic voice. And when I was reading the book, I was right there with you. I felt like I was in the story, just going through in the present moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. For me, it means a lot that people in my own community, regardless of their background, but people that live in the space that I live in or come from where I come from, or that, you know, have some kind of connection, when, you know, that's who I write for. I don't care about, you know, like I write it because I want to write it, not for accolades, not for anything else. But I would be lying if I didn't say that it means something special to me when somebody in my own space, you know, is like, yo, I feel seen, I feel represented, and I was there with you because, you know, I feel like, you know, we added a little something. And we did, you know, for me, I feel like it's a collective. I'm not just saying that. So thank you.
Yeah, Gree has really been really solid through this entire book club. So I just do want to give her flowers for that. She's really represented and given a lot of personal stories, and we've really just loved having her. We got about 6 minutes left. Anyone, especially someone maybe who hasn't said anything yet, want to chime in with a question or maybe even just a quick comment?
I have maybe like a quick comment just to circle back to something that Raquel said a little bit earlier. Just kind of, I guess, doing what a lot of folks have done tonight, is just like thanking you. In particular, because like candidly, I've never been like drawn to memoirs, and I think it's always because of the way that they tend to be written. And this one just had such rich, vivid storytelling. Like you said earlier, like I was with you the entire time, and it felt like someone's life made into story, and it felt like story made into life. And I think it was like just so poetic in a way where like I was like, maybe I can do memoirs, maybe like I can get into them. And so just thank you for kind of pulling me in that way.
Oh, thank you for taking the time out. Everybody's time is valuable. So, you know, I'm glad that it found its way into, you know, your space.
Yeah, for sure. Mr. Chris?
I want to say thanks for all the good speech, Miss Raquel.
Thank you.
For a good show.
Thanks for coming.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have because I have a question. It's about your next film. Is it East of Broadway?
Yeah, that hasn't been going very well because to be really frank and honest with everybody, because I'm, you know, got to keep it real, right? Yeah. I felt a blockage because it's a memoir about gentrification. And then I started, you know, really thinking about it and writing it. And then Trump came in, and suddenly the people that I was talking to all clammed up. And then I decided I didn't want to, you know, and then they would show me different selves, you know, defensive selves. And I'm like, this is not going to work because people are not going to be as honest as, you know, I think I've been. And I can feel it. And, you know, it's not, I'm not going to blame them it's just the time, right? The time, the space, and where it pushed us, right? And then I'm like, I don't know if I want to write it. And then suddenly the pandemic came. And then I'm like, what is the story now? Because in my neighborhood in particular is not right now about gentrification, because I feel like the street, like the area feels very much like it did when I was growing up. And it's, and it's actually maybe even not the, there's always, people like to characterize it as urban blight or whatever, but there's always something comforting, and there's always, there's community in that. And what, we may see the rubble, we may see the violence, but in that there was also very strong community. You know what I mean? But I don't know if I'm seeing that right now. I think that the effects of COVID on us, the, mental health issues, just people being desperate, because it's human to be desperate, to take care, sustain ourselves and our families, has really compelled people into a space that it's self-harming and harming to each other, our communities and whatnot. So, right now, I just don't feel like it's this time, or this is not the space, but I have been thinking about it, because I need to write something. But I go from documentary to writing, documentary writing, and I'm trying to do something with Bird of Paradise. I wrote a script during COVID, during the lockdown.
Oh, wow.
So, but where I kind of, I'm putting it all into, it's inspired by the book, where I'm introducing characters that I had to write out of it, because, I couldn't fit them all, and dramatized a little bit, but it's all about 1989. So if I could distill all that book to 1989, it would be in that space. But yeah. But you just got to try to create. So I had blockage about Easter Broadway, but I had, I felt free to do something else.
Got you.
Yeah.
I know
so that's to be continued, Ron.
Okay, but just funny, your reference to 1989, was that also a reference to the Public Enemy lyric? 1989.
No. 1989. No. It's a golden year, and obviously, we're all inspired by that era in hip hop culture, and being part of that era, part of that time. It definitely informs me. But I'm also informed by, classic salsa, Fania, the Fania movement, New York City, the ground, rubble, concrete, everything about, I said it in the book, Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo may be my Mecca, but New York City will always be my home. So that's the number one inspiration for 1989. It's this area in 1989.
Brenda, did you have a question? I guess not.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much for writing a wonderful piece. And I've had fun reading it. So thank you for this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For the kind words.
Anyone else want to get the last word? This has been such a great Q&A session. I think this is, everyone has been so generous, and thank you to Raquel for being so honest and true with your answers. Ron, do you want to close us out? It's 8:30 and I don't.
Yeah, I repeat what you just said. Just thank you personally to Raquel. I reached out, she came back right away. Sure, I'll do it, no problem. I was like, wow. I wish every author was this easy and quick. So I thank you, Raquel, and also for your generosity and honesty with, sharing your answers and your truth and your story, just sharing your family with us. That's no small feat in Black and brown households, because oftentimes that generation above us or before us, whether it's parents or grandparents, they don't want nothing public. They don't want anything to leave the home, or the apartment. So, for you to kind of take that extra step and you're presenting yourself, but you're also presenting us. You're presenting our interior narrative. So I appreciate that. And thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's anytime that I see, if it's a book club and we're, in the Bronx or uptown, I'm always going to be a priority. Even if I'm working, I'm going to try to find a way to make it happen. Because, I can't get enough dialogue, you know, from my people, because the tribe is what informs everything that you do. And once you lose connection with the people, you lose that voice and you lose the ability to create art in a way that's going to continue to connect with my, you know, with folks, you know what I'm saying? So thank you for having me. And, you know, and thank you for the feedback and the comments and the questions. You know, I hope I answered, you know, your questions, and, you know, you guys and ladies and gentlemen and everybody else, you know, you've also informed me. So thanks for having me. And, you know, it was great talking to y'all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the book club.